Hi, I'm Kathy Plomin, and I'm the 12th District Council member representing much of the rural part of Fayette County. I'm going to share with you a video that was recently shown at the Farm Bureau's annual legislative dinner. It talks about our signature bourbon industry, and this is very important because of the economic impact on Lexington, Fayette County, and Central Kentucky. It talks about the unique collaborations and partnerships it has formed, such as the University of Kentucky's Jim Beam Institute. And I think most important, it addresses what this means to our agricultural folks because of the specific grain that it requires. And this is a higher price point than many other agricultural products right now. So, this is longer than most of our comments, but I know you'll enjoy learning more about our signature bourbon industry.
So in the 1700s, the Commonwealth of Virginia, when we were back part of Virginia, would create corn writs. So if you go to Kentucky and settle the frontier, the western frontier, and grow corn, they would give you title to the land. And that's why a lot of our farmers settled in Kentucky, and a lot of the pioneer distillers who were being driven away from Pennsylvania and places because of the Whiskey Rebellion and the attacks of Andrew Hamilton. So they all settled here in Kentucky, and because we had, hardly any roads, and we're still considered, the frontier, your farmers grew corn, and at the end of the growing season, you either sold it or you watched it rot, or you turned it into whiskey, which became bourbon, and sold it as a commodity, and here we are today. Bourbon is a uniquely American spirit, and I think it's so authentic and genuine. That's why people are drawn to it, and that's why people are drawn to Kentucky, because this is the only place in the world you can walk in the footsteps of Colonel Bean, of Elijah Craig, of Evan Williams, of Colonel Blanton, you name it. All the historical figures that produced this industry are here.
Ever since I watched that episode of Justified, I love bourbon.
It's that good limestone water they say makes the best Kentucky bourbon, and of course it runs fluid here in Bardstown and Nelson County. It's the landscape. I think being close to Louisville, being close to Lexington is, I think it's an amenity in itself too, being close to the big cities. But the distilleries just want to be in Bardstown. Historically, we have been known as the bourbon capital of the world. We have been home to lots of the big boys. The Jim Beam on one side, the Maker's Mark on the other, the Heaven Hill right in the middle. These are the big boys of bourbon. And a lot of the new ones that are coming in, they want to be right there, right in the middle of the Kentucky Bourbon Trail.
We get a lot of the younger drinkers now coming to Kentucky because they want to know where their products are made. And again, Kentucky's the only place you can really do that and have a great time doing it as well. So we're very fortunate now. We get about 2 million visits a year on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. In its history, it's only gone down 1 year, and that was COVID. And next year, the Kentucky Bourbon Trail celebrates its 25th anniversary. And we've got a whole lot of fun stuff planned.
I think people really gravitate towards the fact that it is an all-natural product. You know what's in the bottle, you know where it comes from. It's jobs here in Kentucky or America, but you know where your product is coming from, and it's a really good, clean, almost farm-to-glass product, and I think that there's definitely a place for that in the market.
The bourbon industry at this time, last year's numbers, I believe they said they used about 17 million bushels of Kentucky's corn and small grains. That's an expansion. Obviously, they're going through an expansion. And they say 75% of what they're buying to go into distilleries comes from Kentucky. That's fantastic. And we want to see that number grow. And that opportunity's here. Our farmers can provide that grain to the distilleries. I like to brag that we have 95% of the world's bourbon is made here, and of course 100% of the good stuff.
We partnered up with James Pepper is the distillery that we sell through, and it always interests me, or I like to diversify. Diversification is, I think, key to successful farmers. So we diversified in just to selling to these distilleries. We're getting more profit out of the distilleries. One is because it's a non-GMO product. They'll pay a premium for that. Second is they know where it's coming from. So, you know, we're offering those products, but it comes at an expense to them. As far as a percentage of what I produce, it's still a small percentage, but it's getting your name out there, getting into those doors is what's fun for me to say, you know, hey, I produce for James Pepper or whoever, you know, you might sell for. And to me, that's neat for our farming operation, as small as we are.
I fell in love initially with the Pepper family brand and the story. When I discovered it in 2007, it had largely been forgotten. I found little bits and pieces of the history doing research and quickly realized it was arguably the oldest whiskey brand, or one of the oldest in Kentucky history, and actually in American history, and had an amazing story. And I just couldn't believe that the brand had been forgotten and abandoned, and I thought it'd be a really cool project to relaunch it. This distillery was here before the city neighborhood grew up around it. So it was a little different for them to operate it back in those days than it was for us to get it going today. It actually was beneficial to us to have a smaller footprint. We built a state-of-the-art distillery comparable to what larger producers do, but just on a bit of a smaller scale. So when we started up here, the very first barrels of whiskey filled were made with locally grown Kentucky corn. And that was important to us then, it's important to us now. Brendan has been a great partner, and the Gilkison Farm has been a great partner. Not only do they produce high quality corn that meets our standard pretty much every single time it comes through the door, and we do a lot of testing and analysis, and it's always great, and it produces very flavorful whiskey. But he's also just a great partner to work with in terms of flexibility and trying new things and experimentation.
And the distillery industry, especially the craft industry, has been a wonderful new market for some of our guys to grow something different, grow something they hadn't ever tried before, maybe a unique type of corn, but just in general, a new market, and that's always exciting.
A lot of our farmers who grow corn in this region are supplying corn to the distilleries. Rye grows in the winter. It's part of a crop rotation that's good for our soils, and it gives us an opportunity for another cash crop for our farmers. We get all the benefits of the cover crop from an environmental standpoint, but the farmer can actually make some money off of the rye crop when they just sell it to a local distillery. Local distillery gets to use a locally grown product, so they're not paying for the extra shipping. And so if we can get rye grown on enough acres consistently over time, then we've got a really strong local market for our distilleries and a strong local market for our farmers. It's good for the local economy, it's good for other local industries that rely on agriculture, and it's good for our soils, it's good for the environment, it's ultimately good for the farmers as well.
Even just, 10, 15 years ago, there were only 6 or 7 distilleries here in the Commonwealth. And they're mostly centered around the Lexington, Louisville, Bardstown area, which we kind of call the Amber Triangle. And nowadays, it's interesting because the craft distilling movement has come to Kentucky from the West Coast, and we now have almost 100 distilleries here in the Commonwealth. Most of the new growth has come from that craft movement, and these are young entrepreneurs, distillers who come from all over the country, and they wanted to come to Kentucky to take part in that rich history and legacy of making the world's finest whiskeys and making Kentucky bourbon.
The craft distillery tour has become one of the more popular tourism attractions in Kentucky, right behind the Bourbon Trail itself.
Being a craft distillery here in Lexington, we honor the heritage of distilling before us back in the 1800s, early 1900s. We do things very traditional. We use 2 copper pot stills, and most everything is done by hand. And it means a lot to continue distilling in this historic part of the state.
We do pre-prohibition style distilling, so we distill in multiple size barrels. We distill in everything from 6.1 gallon barrels all the way to 53 gallon barrels.
Yeah.
And so we had to determine that time frame as far as how long it needed to stay in the barrel and to get our flavor profile. But we hit a home run the first time. We were very blessed from that standpoint.
So the space was really important to us, but extremely important to me. I wanted to put a woman's touch on our space. And so when you walk into our storefront, it's like a high-end boutique. And then when you walk into the distillery, it was important, again, the chandeliers are my favorite part of the distillery.
Yeah.
We were able to put Swarovski line chandeliers, porcelain tile, granite countertops. You have antique glass, just again, very sophisticated and elegant space where people can come and enjoy our bourbon. We feel like a fresh approach also includes a fresh approach to the tasting experience, and our space really signifies that.
Our main consumer is a woman between the ages of 30 and 50, and that's our #1 consumer for our product.
People were very pleasantly surprised by our bourbon. Our flavor profile is very unique. You don't have that burn that you normally get, and we're at 95 proof, so people are very excited, welcoming, and wanting to support us.
The art of distilling is a hands-on experience. You learn by doing. You get out and you do the work. And I always tell people if they want to be a distiller, be prepared to work a lot of long hours because you're learning the distilling process from the ground up. Anybody that's wanting to be a distiller, I would start at the Beam Institute at UK. That's a great learning process.
Kentucky bourbon is a huge part of the bourbon industry. It's 95% of the world's bourbon is produced really just around here. And so teaching on a column still, teaching on a full size column still with 4 fermenters, with a full lab teaching space, 660 barrel maturation house. Every piece of this kind of builds towards making this unique and empowering for the next generation.
The James Beebe Institute for Kentucky Spirit was created for the advancement of the bourbon industry via research, workforce development, environmental sustainability, community outreach, and social responsibility-led programming.
We believe there's a good pipeline of workers that can be trained at the University of Kentucky, no matter whether they want to be a distiller or whether they want to be on the business side of the industry. We are the epicenter for that kind of training. And we are the epicenter not only because we have good faculty, but we have collaborators from the many distilleries that are in Kentucky.
Together, we set out to educate the next generation of distillers, scientists, and engineers, the future leaders in the industry.
Our product is the students. Our product is those students going off and starting businesses, supporting businesses, working with international brands that are moving all our bourbon all over the world.
The bourbon industry is a $9 billion industry. It employs over 22,000 employees in the state of Kentucky, and it also supports bringing over 2 million visitors to the state. With the Beam Institute located in the state of Kentucky, we're able to be the hub for collaboration, bringing all industry members together, which certainly drives growth and innovation. And it's not just for Kentucky, it goes beyond Kentucky. It's a global impact.
Bourbon is a is one of the Commonwealth's most treasured industries, and it's thriving right now. We generate about $285 million in local and state taxes, and we pay $1.8 billion in federal excise taxes. Those are both big numbers. We're the highest taxed large industry in Kentucky, large manufacturing industry, and we pay more in federal alcohol excise taxes than any other state. Bourbon is good from Kentucky from an economic standpoint and from a tourism standpoint, and the tourism numbers are equally as staggering. It's a great demographic for your local communities. We get about 75% of all of our tourists come from outside Kentucky. It's a younger demographic. It's mainly between 25 and 40. They come in packs of 3 to 5 people at least. They stay on average 3 to 6 days a year. So they're coming in groups, they're staying longer, and they've got disposable income. Almost a half of them have household incomes above $100,000. So it's really helping kind of change the state of the visitor demographic in Kentucky overnight.
Americans actually figured out how to store ice. Hence, we figured out how to make cocktails, because a key component to a cocktail is dilution. The majority of my business is tourists. I know that tourism in Kentucky is a billion-dollar industry right now, and so much of that is because of the bourbon industry and the popularity of it. I mean, it's the driving force behind my business is welcoming people and giving them that Southern hospitality, and coming in and breaking bread and talking about it over drinks and good pours and cocktails. It's just, you know, it's ingrained in our culture here.
Bourbon is bringing people together because you can have conversations about bourbon. I never thought that I could sit down with somebody that I didn't know that's sitting at on a bar stool beside me, and we're talking about bourbon. There's a lot of history about bourbon, and it's not just about the name of bourbon, it's about the people that produce it and put it on the shelves.
What bourbon has done to tourism and the hospitality business, nothing's been seen like that in Kentucky.
But we have a lot of competition out there, and right now there's over 3,500 distilleries in all 50 states. We rank 12th in the country in the number of distilleries, even though we produce still 95% of the world's bourbon.
I think when you look at what Louisville and Bardstown have managed to achieve, I think Lexington being sort of the third peg in that bourbon triangle, if you will, we're always looked and said, you know, Louisville, Lexington, and Bardstown are all about an hour drive apart from each other. Most of the major distilleries are along that route, and there's no reason why Lexington shouldn't be on the same footing in terms of, you know, the bourbon trail and tourism and people spending the night in the hotels and eating out at the restaurants. We have so much to offer here, and we have a very unique culture and city and environment to offer as well.